Good evening. Good evening. With your permission, I'd like to call this meeting to order. And as a first step, ask the town clerk to take the roll.
John Donovan. Here. Michael Hurley.
Here.
Jay Lipp.
Here.
Gaylord Meyer.
Here.
Eric Sundman. Pete Ambrose.
Here.
Catherine Burstein.
Here.
Nathaniel Schindler.
Here.
Jeff Steele.
Here.
Keith Varian.
Here.
Ed Bateson.
Here.
Laura Devlin.
Here.
Hank Ferentz.
Here.
Dave McKenzie.
Here.
Mary McCullough.
Here.
Heather Dean.
Present.
Joe DiMartino.
Here.
Bill Gerber.
Here.
Joe Palmer.
Here.
Cindy Waldron.
Here.
Bill D'Amica. Josh Garskoff.
Here.
Lauren O'Brien. Ruth Smay.
Here.
Carol Way.
Here.
Julie Gottlieb.
Here.
Alan Marks.
Here.
Sheila Marmion.
Here.
Jay Walk.
Here.
Liz Zezima.
Here.
Jen Hochberg.
Here.
Kevin Hopkins.
Here.
Eric Newman.
Here.
Phil Pierce.
Here.
Hal Schwartz.
Here.
Kathy Braun.
Here.
Alex Durrell.
Here.
Jason Lee.
Here.
Tom McCarthy.
Here.
Jeff Milarano. Pam Iacono.
Here.
Ellen Jacob.
Here.
Lori McCardle.
Here.
Carol Pontrelli. Chris Timniak.
Here.
Brian Caffarelli.
Here.
Brian Farnan.
Here.
Ray Newberger.
Here.
William Perugini.
Here.
Bruce Ryan.
Here.
Okay. All right, thank you. May I ask you all to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Thank you. All right, as our first order of business, we need to elect a moderator. Are there any nominations for moderator? Mr. Ambrose.
Good evening. Peter Ambrose, District 2. It is with great pleasure tonight that I place into nomination the name of Mary McCullough for moderator of the RTM. Mary is a seasoned veteran of the RTM. She has served 5 terms on the RTM and has chaired the Education and Recreation Committee for 2 of those terms. Mary and her husband, Mark, moved into Fairfield in 1979. They have 2 children, both of whom graduated from the school system here. Mary's son and daughter-in-law reside in Fairfield now with Mary's grandchild. During her term on the RTM, Mary has demonstrated qualities of fairness and leadership. She's open-minded, she's considerate, and temperate in both thought and action. If this nomination succeeds tonight, I'm pleased to announce that Mary will be the first woman ever to serve as a moderator of this RTM. I enthusiastically ask you to support me in this nomination for Mary McCullough as moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambrose. Is there a second? Mr. Schwartz?
Hal Schwartz, District 7. I would be very honored to second this nomination for Mary. Mary and I go back a long time on the RTM. Mary was the chairman of the Ed and Rec, and she followed me as chairman of the Ed and Rec Committee. I would be very honored for Mary to be the first woman moderator for this RTM, and I think you should all support her. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Any further discussion? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Looks like it's unanimous. Congratulations, Mary. Congratulations.
Why, thank you. Where's my friend in the back? Well, be kind. Thank you all very much for your kindness tonight, and I look forward to serving you as the moderator for the next year. The next order of business is to elect a deputy moderator. Is there anyone here who would like to place a name into nomination? Peter?
I'd like to place into nomination the name of Hank Ferentz as deputy moderator of this August body. I served with Hank on the Finance Committee for many years. He has served as deputy moderator for the past term, and I think he brings to this body enthusiasm and experience. And I look forward to working with Hank in the future.
A second? Gaylord?
Gaylord Meyer, District 1. I too would like to second the nomination for Hank. This is my second term serving on the RTM, and for the last 2 years Hank has guided me in the back of the room as to my behavior. And it is with great pleasure that I would like to nominate Hank. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor of Hank Ferentz serving as the deputy moderator? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Ferentz.
All right, all I want to say is thank you.
Thank you. The next order of business is to nominate and elect members to serve on the Special Legislative Management Committee. Can I hear nominations? Mr. Bateson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 3. On the Republican side, I'd like to place my name in nomination along with Michael Hurley and Pam Iacono.
Any further nominations? Representative Schwartz.
Hal Schwartz, District 7. I'd like to nominate myself as well as Sheila Marmion to round out the Special Legislative Management Committee.
Thank you. Any other or further nominations from the floor? Seeing none, all in favor of Ed Bateson, Michael Hurley, Pam Iacono, Representative Hal Schwartz, and Sheila Marmion to serve on the Special Legislative Management Committee. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I'm going to ask that we recess for 5 minutes so this committee can meet and perform a few minutes of business before we move on. While they're meeting, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind you of something that a member of this body once told me, that it's very important when we come to the microphone to actually use the microphone so that everyone in the room can hear us. So that's just one reminder. Thank you. When they return, we will break into committee assignments as assigned by the Special Management Legislative Committee. And when we'll come back, those committees will have elected their leadership for the next term. And then we'll get going. Okay, we're back in order. Hi. Okay, we have a report from the Special Legislative Management Committee.
Pamela Iacono, District 9. Why am I nervous? I've stood before you 1,000 times. Madam Moderator, I have the names of the people in the subcommittees. For Education and Recreation, Jay Lipp, Jeff Melaragno, Jason Lee, Brian Farnan, Carol Way, John Donovan, Bill D'Amica, Julie Gottlieb, Kevin Hopkins, and Phil Pierres. For Finance, Catherine Burstein, Alex Durrell, Ellen Jacobs, Laura Devlin, Peter Ambrose, Lori McCardle, David McKenzie, Bill Gerber, Sheila Marmion, Eric Newman. For Legislation and Administration, Michael Hurley, Keith Varian, Ray Newberger, Hank Ferentz, Jeff Steele, Pam Iacono, Catherine Braun, Heather Dean, Josh Garskoff, and Hal Schwartz. Public Health and Safety, Ed Bateson, Chris Timniak, Carol Pontrelli, Brian Caffarelli. Public Health, Joe DiMartino, Bill Perigno, and Perugini, Gaylord Meyer. Hold on, I'm working off 2 sheets. Jen Hochberg, Cindy Waldron, and Liz Zazima. And then for Public Works and Planning, Mary McCullough, Joe Palmer, Bruce Ryan, Tom McCarthy, Nathan Schindler, Eric Sunman, Alan Marks, Lauren O'Brien, Cindy Waldron, and Elizabeth Zazima. Did I miss one of them? Oh,
That's a
Jay,
list.
I'm sorry. Jay's on Public Health and Safety.
Thank you.
That's our report.
Now, in order for us to continue business tonight, we need to find 5 locations where you will break into your committees, and by 8:45, we'll elect leadership and come back and report that leadership to the town clerk, and then we will start our meeting. Thank you. Now, suggestion on 5 separate locations. We have Finance right here. Superintendent's conference room, L&A. We have another conference room, break lounge, which we can do Ed and Rec. Public Works and Planning, we can do in the back of the room. Public Health and Safety, why don't we meet out in the hall? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a lot to do tonight, so I just want to keep us moving quickly. Can I have a report, please, from each newly elected committee chair? If you would be so kind as to queue up by the microphone and report the nominations and leadership for the 5 committees. Thank you.
For the Finance Committee, Peter Ambrose, Chair, David McKenzie, Vice Chair, and Lori McCardle as Secretary.
Public Works and Planning, Tom McCarthy, Chair, Eric Sunman, Deputy Chair, and Representative Zezma, Secretary. If I got that right.
Public Health and Safety, Joe DiMartino, Chair, Gaylord Meyer, Vice Chair, and William Perugini, Secretary. Thank you.
Carol Way, the Education and Recreation Committee, Carol Way, Chair, Vice Chair, Bill D'Amica, Secretary, John Donovan.
Thank you.
Jeff Steele, District 2. This is so weird to be up. I gotta say. We call you Miss Moderator, Ms. Moderator, Madam Moderator. District 2, Jeff Steele, LNA. I have been elected as chairman, and Catherine Braun will be deputy, and Pam Iacono, secretary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. All right, the next order of business is for us to report on, and please bear with me, it's the Charter of the Town of Fairfield, Article 11, Standards of Conduct. And I am going to have to read this to you tonight to remind you of our standards of conduct. So just bear with me. I'll do it as quickly and expeditiously as possible. Section 11-1, Declaration of Policy. Elected and appointed town officers, RTM members, members of the boards, commissions, authorities, and committees, and all employees of the town shall demonstrate by their example the highest standard of ethical conduct, to the end that the public may justifiably have trust and confidence in the integrity of government. As agents of the public purpose, they shall hold their offices or positions for the benefit of the public, shall recognize that the public interest is their primary concern, and shall faithfully discharge the duties of their offices regardless of personal considerations. Next section, 11-2, Conflicts of Interest. No elected or appointed town officer or employee or RTM member or any member of any authority, board, commission, or committee shall, A, solicit or accept any gift, directly or indirectly, whether in the form of money, loan, gratuity, favor, service, thing, or promise, or in any other form, under circumstances in which it can be reasonably be inferred that the gift is intended to influence the town officer, employee, or member in the performance of official duties. Nothing in this paragraph shall preclude the solicitation or acceptance of lawful contributions for election campaigns. B, disclose confidential information gained by reason of the office or position, to use such information for the personal gain or benefit of anyone. C, knowingly have or acquire any financial interest or any personal beneficial interest, direct or indirect, in any contract or purchase order for any supplies, materials, equipment, or contractual services furnished to or used by the town in connection with any project, matter, or thing which comes within the town's officers, employees, or members' jurisdiction, or jurisdiction of the board, commission, authority, committee, or body of which the person is a member, unless such interest is acquired through being the lowest responsible bidder after public advertisement, or D, engage in any business transaction or activity or have financial interest, direct or indirect, which is incompatible with the proper discharge of the official duties or which may tend to impair the independence of judgment in the performance of town officers, employees, or members' official duties. Stick with me, only 3 more. Disclosure of interest. Any elected or appointed town officer or employee, RTM member, or member of any board, commission, authority, or committee who possesses or who acquires such private interest as might reasonably tend to create a conflict with the public interest shall make disclosure thereof to such board, commission, authority, committee, or body, and such person shall be disqualified from action on any matter involving the private interest. Fair and equal treatment. No elected or appointed town officer or employee, RTM member, or member of any board, commission, authority, or committee shall use an official position to secure or grant special consideration, treatment, advantage, privilege, or exemption to himself or herself, or to any person beyond that which is available to every other person. This provision is not intended to prevent an RTM member from properly representing the people of the member's district. And finally, penalties and disciplinary action for violations. The failure to comply with, or any violation of, the standards of conduct established by this charter shall be grounds for the removal from office or discharge from employment of the offending town officer, employee, RTM member, or member of any board, commission, authority, or committee of the Board of Selectmen. In its discretion may void any contract entered into or adopted in violation of this charter. the Board of Selectmen or Ethics Commission may recommend disciplinary measures for RTM members who fail to comply with or who violate these standards, but the RTM retains the final authority to discipline its members. Thank you for your interest and your quiet. Now, the next item on our call, Mr. Bateson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 3. I'd like to make a motion to take an item out of order, that being to move item number 8 up on the agenda to accommodate bond counsel, who is here this evening and billing us by the hour.
Second. Representative Marmion. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. We'll go to a presentation on that item.
While Mr. Mayor is our Chief Fiscal Officer is making his way to the mic to give us a presentation, just want to give the quick summary, the headline on this. This is something we do every couple of years. You're basically authorizing us to the town, if the interest rates bear out and if we can find the ability to save money on interest, to refinance existing bonds and not extend past the current term. So in simplest way I can say it, it's an opportunity for the town to save between $600,000 and $700,000. Mr. Mayor?
That's the presentation. But before I go into that, I'd like to congratulate you, Mary, on your election as moderator, the first female moderator in the town of Fairfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
As the father of 2 daughters, I appreciate all such breakthroughs and look forward to that. Also, a word to all of you. Congratulate you on your election or your re-election. As many of you know, my office is always available. If you have questions, just call. It gets a little busy sometimes, so you might not get a call right back, but you will get a call back within a reasonable timeline. As Mike mentioned, we are basically refinancing some bonds that become callable in the middle of December. With the refinancing about a little over $11.5 million worth of bonds. Whenever we do this, there's always a cushion in the motion in case it becomes other bonds, additional amount of bonds become available that we can add in. We are going to save, as Mike said, net of costs through this refinance about $700,000 over the net life of the bond. The results, based upon current interest rates, is a 6% net present value savings when compared to the current bonds. Industry guidelines and GFOA best practices recommend any refunding where you have a 3% or more net present value savings. And that's pretty much it. It's a very straightforward bond resolution. There's nothing in there that's exciting or adventurous. We just raise $12 million, pay off the old bonds, and that's it. And as it was mentioned, we have bond counsel here in case there's any intricate questions.
Any questions from the body? Seeing none?
Thank
Any
you.
comments from the public? I did not read this. I am going to read it once. This is what you'll be voting on. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved, that the bond resolution entitled, a resolution authorizing appropriation of $12,500,000 to refund certain of the town's outstanding bonds and authorizing the issuance of refunding bonds to finance such appropriation, consisting of 2 pages, be and hereby is approved. I have a motion to accept this item. Representative Schwartz, a second. Representative Ryan. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. I didn't think I did. All right. Now we're going to go back to item number 4, which is to consider and act upon the following resolution. Yes. Yes, Mr. Bates.
Ed Bateson, District 3, apologies. I just want to clarify, how are we treating committees this evening?
Committee as a whole. Is that all right?
Okay, so we're not going to break down into subcommittee and vote on the issues?
Not
Okay, thank you. So we are proceeding with presentations and
and
then
voting on each item.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So proceeding to item number 4, to consider and act upon the following resolution recommended by the town clerk. Resolved that in accordance with the town charter and state filing rules, the representative town meeting hold the regular meetings for the year 2014 on the following dates. Are there any questions on this? Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 4. My question is, we just had this discussion in our committee with regards to meeting on our committee nights, and 3 committees meet on Monday. For the January 27th meeting, that would fall on January 20th, which I think is Martin Luther King, and also February 24th, it would fall on 2/17, which is President's Day. I could be wrong on this. I'm just wondering, will we still be meeting on those days for committees, or will there be a change? And maybe I'm just being premature about this.
You can, yep.
The Monday meetings would move to Tuesday night because all the buildings will be closed.
Okay.
Because they're federal holidays.
All right, so we've been put on notice. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we have to act on this. Does anybody have any conflict? Go ahead, Retzbert.
I was going to make a motion.
Thank you. A motion by Representative Bateson to accept this. Second by Representative McCarthy. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Next item. To consider and act upon the minutes of the regular meeting held on October 28th, 2013. Any questions or concerns on the minutes that were in your packet? Can I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented? Representative Hochberg, second by Representative DiMartino. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Representative Burstein, Pergini, Lee, Schindler, Iacono, Gerber. What is this, a quiz? Farnan, Caparelli, Timniak, Waldron, Gerber I called, Donovan, Devlin, McCardle, Piers, Durrell, and Melaragno, Zezima, sorry, thank you. Thank you. Next item. Okay. The next item is to hear, consider, and act upon the following appointments to the Penfield Building Committee as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Ian Bass, 495 Lally Boulevard. Robert Bolito, 83 Wheeler Park Avenue. James P. Bradley, 111 Cherry Lane. Andrew Graceffa, thank you, 165 York Road. Kenneth Jones, 320 Farris Road. Jane Nelson, West Morgan Avenue. Ellery Plotkin, 70 Woodbine Lane. And William Sapone, 143 Hulls Farm Road. And Richard Special, 112 Homestead Lane. Mr. Selectman. Can I have a motion to accept that. Representative Bateson, second. Representative Dean, thank you. Discussion.
In your packet, you should have two things for each person on this list. A questionnaire that we have adopted to kind of standardize the questions that we ask every nominee for every committee that will come before you, and a resume for each of the nominees that have come up. What we tried to do is balance different stakeholders in picking the nominees for this. Just so everybody here is aware, we had over 40 applications come through for the building committee. We tried to pick a representative group of stakeholders. So you'll find someone from the beach area, a couple people from the prior building committee, people from other building committees, somebody from Parks and Rec, somebody new who wasn't part of any of those before. So we kind of tried to balance that out to form, if you will, a well-balanced committee to help evaluate this and how we proceed forward from here. Any questions for me or any of the individuals nominated? Is that okay?
Representative Bateson?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 3. This is more along the lines of some advice or counsel for the first selectmen. For several members of my caucus this evening, this was their first meeting. I have to admit that having done this for several years, I know what a building committee is when it comes to refinancing bonds and accepting state grants. To the initiated members of this body, these are relatively routine items. To the new members in our caucus, this was some weighty material to the newly initiated to this body. And to them, I understand where you're coming from, and I sympathize with you, having been in your seats several years ago. I was disappointed that we didn't get this information in a timely manner. I had to exert, our leadership, our experienced members had to exert a lot of energy to get this to be acted upon this evening for our new members, because they were hesitant in not knowing what was being familiar with the terms and what we do in these situations. So as a courtesy, I guess what I'm saying is that we really put all our chips on the line to get our new members at peace with the process that's occurring tonight. But I got to tell you, in the future, I'm not going to be exerting that kind of leadership role in trying to get these matters of business accomplished.
May I? Mr. Bateson, just as kind of a follow-up to that, to clarify, I think in the time you've been on here, certainly in the last 2 years, we've gotten the material to this board on a timely basis. For the most part? Maybe. Like a Yankee fan trying to give a Red Sox fan some credit.
Yeah, maybe. I'm saying, I'm speaking to this instance this evening.
Yeah, and again, that's what I was trying to clarify. For the members that have not been on this body before, I was just trying to clarify that your comments related to tonight's meeting.
Correct, they do.
Not a recurring issue.
We explained this in caucus that, the RTM was just seated. There was a lot of extenuating circumstances, and I understand that, but I just, I have to make them feel at ease that this is, this isn't the way we normally do business, and we're not going to do business.
Yeah, and correct. It's not the way we have done business in the past. We are not trying to change the rules in that regard. Maybe. You're such a softie. And again, for those of you that are new, and I'm going to look to the town clerk here, but I believe this was as quick as we could possibly get the information out to all the bodies, unless there was another hiccup that I wasn't aware of. All right. It is that vicious recount that held things up and kept these things from going out sooner than that, according to the town clerk. So, but the simplest answer to Mr. Bateson's question is that this information will be out to everybody, typically in time for the committee meetings, which are typically more than a week before. So you'll be getting this more than a week before the RTM meeting itself.
Representative Donovan?
John Donovan, District 1. Madam Moderator, through you to the First Selectman. I got the information tonight, thank you. I'd love emails. I know that might be an issue, but separate topic. I had a question in terms of the specific item here, which is related to the charge. And I understand that, you know, we're not talking about the charge, we're talking about putting in place the specific people. But I was at a meeting, I think it was in September, where, First Selectman, you presented to a variety of people on the different options related to Penfield Pavilion. I believe it started with 3 options, it went to 4. And as I read the charge, I didn't see anything about that input to these people. And it's very challenging to go through and try to approve people when you look at them being empowered to spend $1 million, where I thought there were a lot of town citizens who were looking for better understanding in terms of what are the individual options and what do they cost.
Correct. And as part of the building committee process, let's take it from the top in terms of what we're doing. One, that was on Fair TV. So we will identify to the committee that they can actually go back and watch both the Board of Selectmen when this was originally presented, as well as that meeting where there's some public input coming back in. There are about 100 people, I'm going to say, in that room. I didn't count, so that's an estimate on that side. In addition, after we published the charge, we waited a week, and we've got a number of emails that came back in. I'm going to say 50 or more. Again, that's not an exact count. And we are going to make copies of those and hand those out to the members of the committee. So they have the ability to see the presentation multiple times. They have the ability to see the emails that come back in. And their charge is to go through this process. That's why when you look at the background of these people, a number that have been on building committees before, they're familiar with the process, understand that what we're looking for is a very public discussion and a very public decision process, so we come up with the best answer for our community. We did not lock them into those 4 in case there's a 5th option that comes up out of that topic. We certainly are making them aware of those 4, certainly from that standpoint.
So then it would be my understanding then that you're really looking for these people to come back with recommendations on the cost of the options that they see as fit prior to spending the $1 million that the charge puts in place, just for clarification.
Correct.
That was it for me.
Basically where we are is last January, when we didn't think this project was quite as complex, as part of an item, for those of you that were here, the Storm Sandy non-recurring project, we did that $5 million package. This was $1 million as part of that. At the time, we thought it possibly was a more simple repair than what's been involved. This is going to be more complex. None of the estimates that we come back are in that $1 million range, so that it would have to come back before the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and this body to spend more than that amount of money. Second, we are also currently negotiating with our insurance companies, so we'll have, that's the steps in the process, if you will. And again, this is for those of you that live in the beach area, have friends in the beach area, it's the same process that every homeowner went through down there. Step 1 is to sit down with the insurance company and find out what they call eligible costs and what they will cover as part of that. Step 2 is compare that to the appraised value of the structure and see whether you're at less than 50% or greater than 50% in terms of the repair cost. Once that's determined, that kind of defines what you're allowed to do. If you're less than 50%, potentially you can repair it as is. If it's greater than 50%, you're required to come up to the current FEMA codes to rebuild that. So some significant cost issues there. And then the question will also be, how much of those will our insurance company coverage? For those who've been around, I think you've heard it, but just to be clear for everybody, we have a policy that has a $500,000 deductible. So the first $500,000 is a cost to the town. Does that help?
First hand, I saw Representative Braun.
Kathy Braun, District 8. Through you, Madam Moderator, to First Selectman Tetro. A couple follow-ups. Can you just explain the difference between the Town Facilities Commission, the First Selectmen's Facilities Commission? I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. There is a First Selectmen's Facilities Committee or something that meets, and then we have individual building committees. Is there a different, will the Town Facilities Commission weigh in on this? I think it has in the past on the prior Penfield Building Committee. Do they provide any kind of review process?
I'm not quite sure what took place for the entire process of the prior Penfield committee, so I'll partially answer that.
Okay.
But there were, believe, at least 2 representatives from the Town Facilities Commission, or what's affectionately known as the TFC, that sat on the prior Penfield Building Committee. If you look at the makeup of this committee, Mr. Jones and Mr. Special are both members currently of the TFC. Mr. Sapone is a former member of the TFC. So we have definitely TFC perspective in terms of what's taken place here. Did I miss anybody? Mr. Brad? No, he's not on the TFC right now. Mr. Bradley was a former member of the TFC, and if I understand it correctly, in the annals of Fairfield history, he was one of the people that started the TFC and was the initial members.
So there will be no official role, although there are members who have been on the other committees.
Correct.
And then I was here when this was voted on, I think in 2010, for the first renovation of Penfield, or the second renovation. My understanding was we voted on the funding after we had the design options presented to us, and it seems like that's happening in the reverse this time. Can you just explain that a little bit? We approved $1 million as part of the Hurricane Sandy, $5 million. Now it's going to go over that. So can you just explain the process of our level of review going forward? Will we have designs when we have to approve more money? Because it looks like we will.
Correct, we will.
And at that point...
At that point last January, it was, at the best information we had, we thought it might be closer to more of a repair option, much like coming out of Irene.
Okay.
All right. When it after more extensive review and with our engineers weighing in, it realized there are some significant changes we have to make. So very definitely, because when the dollars come back forward, there'll be not only design but also a justification for those dollars.
And at that point, we might have more information about reimbursements, I'm assuming, as well?
Well, we'll have the insurance information well before that.
Okay, and then this building committee, is it the same as all other building committees? Like, do all building committees have the authority to actually do the work? They're actually the client, they're the people that make all the decisions.
Correct.
They hire the architects, the engineers, the
Much
construction
like the
company?
first Penfield Building Committee or the school building committees we formed.
Okay. Well, then, I do have one concern, and I know it's not our jurisdiction to talk about the charge. I think the flooding issue should be front and center of any of their mission statement or their charge, and it seems almost like an afterthought. I'm sure there will be much discussion about whether the old building contributed to flooding or didn't contribute to flooding, but I would hope that that would be a very top priority, that whatever the new design is, that's, you know, it can't contribute to it. There's sort of a difference of opinion on whether the last one did or not. Certainly the last one didn't hold up.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct in terms of this site and whatever we can do to provide for flood mitigation within confines of this site. You're absolutely correct. That's been an ongoing topic of discussion. That was part of the Board of Selectmen discussion, if you had a chance to watch that. And it certainly was a question that was brought up at the public hearings we had. In addition to this, there's a larger hazard mitigation plan that's being formed for the beach area to look at what we can do to improve our response and resiliency in a flood situation should a Storm Sandy or something close come back. But the purpose of this committee is to focus on Penfield and that, if you will, section of land. It is not to address the flood issues in the entire beach area. That's another project.
But it will obviously be coordinated with whatever the larger, broader project
Absolutely.
design plan is. Okay. Thank you very much.
Representative Schwartz.
Hal Schwartz, District 7. Madam Moderator, if it would be possible to bring up the members of the building committee who are here, they can introduce themselves, and maybe the body could ask them some questions. If you could ask them to come up, please, I'd appreciate that.
Certainly. Thank you very much for that opportunity. I believe all members that are present here tonight, if they would please join us in the front of the room here. And if you would all introduce yourselves. You've had their resumes in your packet. I understand some of you didn't get your packets until late. So if you would just come to the microphone, introduce yourselves, and tell us why you would like to serve on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Rob Bolito, 83 Wheeler Park Avenue here in Fairfield. Until recently, I was the Vice Chairman of the Board of Finance, and apparently have a little time on my hands now. So all kidding aside, I'm very eager to be involved with this project. It is a major civic asset. It's something that's going to affect generations to come, and I look forward to being a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ian Bass, 495 Lally Boulevard, up until Storm Sandy. Castle Avenue now until a month from now, when we'll finally be returning to our house down at the beach. I've lived through this storm. I've lived through several other storms. I live directly across the street from the pavilion. I'm very much involved with what goes on in the area, also serving as president of the Fair Acres Association, representing approximately 400 homeowners in the beach. I'm living the insurance nightmare of what goes on down there. I'm very familiar. I was involved to a certain degree with the last Penfield Building Committee. I showed up to almost all the meetings, and as a resident close to the pavilion was able to illustrate to them some things that you would never know unless you lived down at the beach and saved the town several $1,000s in terms of the design. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, but I hope to add to that process by being on this committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Jane Nelson. I'm affectionately known on this committee as the new one, as I've been introduced as that. I've been a resident of Fairfield for about 5 years. My interest in this committee is just to ensure from a new person, I'm as close as I possibly can be. How's that? As a new person to the Fairfield community, I just would like to ensure that we make sure that everyone's voice is heard. There's a lot of emotion about this topic, and I want to ensure that there's transparency and communication to the public and to everyone who's involved in it. I'm a certified project management professional. I've most recently spent 15 years at the global level for Chanel, dealing with various countries, so I know how to facilitate groups. And I just want to, once again, make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that you hear everything that we want to talk about. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Special. I'm currently a member of the TFC and the past chair of the Sherman project, of which we had a great deal of FEMA involvement, so I'm kind of well-schooled in that aspect of the current project. I'm the director of Special Testing Laboratories, which is an engineering laboratory. I'm a hands-on construction person for over 40 years.
Thank you.
Ellery Plotkin. I was a 10-year member of this austere body. I know what you're going through, and I know the process well. I was also past 10 years on the Parks and Rec Commission, of which I chaired 7. And I was on the first Penfield Building Committee, as was Mr. Jones. So for purposes of continuity, I look forward to serving on this committee. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bill Sapone, 143 Halls Farm Road. I've been chairman of the Fairfield Woods Building Committee for several years. I was on the TFC before that. I've been doing volunteer projects for the town in that sense since 2007, mostly on the school side. And I go down to the beach all the time, and I love Penfield Pavilion, and that's basically, I want to try and contribute to make it come back to where it should be. Thank you.
I'm Jim Bradley, and I'm probably the oldest member of the commission, if you're the newest, and been on the town facilities, started with the town facilities commission, been on the harbor management commission, been on 3 different school committees, chaired both committees on school space, including the famous 1 high school, 2 high school committee, and have 43 years experience in construction management, and I actually do this for a living, which is either really good or really bad, I'm not sure. So looking forward to helping the town again, and with a good public, transparent process, and getting as much expertise as we can to apply to the problem.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ken Jones. I was a previous member of the first Penfield Building Committee. I'm a structural engineer, also a member of the TFC right now, and I too I'm really upset about what happened. I hope we can make it a much better facility for the town to use in the future.
Hi, good evening. My name is Andrew Graceffa, and I'm 165 York Road.
Fairfield resident for about 7 years. I'm trained as an architect and currently a sustainability consultant in South Norwalk. And I'm, just thankful to be part of this great group to help, manage this process and help the revitalization of Penfield Pavilion.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the body? Representative Steele. You were waiting.
I mean, Mary, really, if there's anyone to forget. Wow. Jeff Steele, District 2. So we're approving this committee, or a committee, for the second time, and I think a third of the members, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Jones, Mr. Plotkin, I think, Richard, are you also from the previous building committee? No. Okay, so 2 of you then. Okay. Are there any sort of lessons learned from the first building committee that can be transferred to the second building committee? Any sort of perspective going into this? Because clearly, having served on the first one, is there anything you can, that, without getting into too much detail, anything you would change, or any new outlook or focus you would have on the second one? Sort of lessons learned. And I'll ask the 2 of you. Is there anything you can convey?
I'll answer one of the things that excuse me. One thing that I think is really important to notice, or to know, is that the flood elevations have been changing dramatically. For about 70 years, the flood elevations were set at, I'm not sure exactly what they might have been for Penfield Pavilion. It might have been elevation 9 or 10. About a year or 2 before Penfield went into design, sorry, can't hear it? Can't? Okay. About 2 years before Penfield project went into the works, the flood elevation was raised again at that point. After 70 years, it hadn't changed. It went up to elevation 11. Right after Penfield had its, we had its demise at this point, those flood elevations were raised again by another 4 feet. It's a very dynamic environment. I think that's one thing we have to really recognize as far as a building committee. There are other ways to use that property too, but I think that's a really important thing to know. It's a dynamic area as far as design. It's very difficult, and we need to have not only a great building committee, but we need to have very good design professionals that are willing to or can deal with that kind of environment. And I want you to also understand too is that I don't know where FEMA stands right now as changing those elevations again. Those were in the works. Those changed to elevation 15 was already in the works when Penfield was starting to be designed, and they had just set the elevations at 11. I don't know if maybe they're set at 17 right now. It's a very dynamic area, and I don't know, global warming, that's not for us to decide, but it's something that I think we all need to recognize in whatever we come up with.
Okay, well, my role was not construction. It was more design and reporting to the Parks and Rec Commission, of which I was a member, and to keep them informed, because it is a Parks and Recs facility. Of course, like Ken and many of you, when I saw that building, my heart sunk. I just couldn't believe what happened to this building. But a couple of things that I just observed. Number one, Richard White was there every day during the construction of that building. And those of you who have sat on this body before, I'm sure you know Richard, and what a great servant he was to the town of Fairfield, very knowledgeable guy. So I always felt confident with him there that at least the reports I was getting back from the construction people and sitting on that committee was that this was going to be a secure building. So, it was a shocker what happened to the building. The other thing is that the building committee did not put that bulkhead wall that was out along the beach side, that big bulkhead that sunk, that big wall. That was done later by, I'm not really quite sure who, but I suppose as a member of this committee we'll get to know some facts about that. But some people felt it was the bulkhead that trapped the water, caused the flooding, undermined the building, and caused the damage. The building itself isn't broken. As I recall, not one window was broken in the building. It's just tilted, and of course the underpinning is where the problems are. So That's all I have to offer at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the body? Representative Pontrelli. Sorry, Mark, Alan.
How's this mic? Representative Pontrelli, District 9. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think this is a question to to this committee up here, the candidates. It says that this is very awkward, that the committee is to review and recommend options, and it's written in the plural options. Does the committee have a timeline at which they actually come up with several options and then come forward with just one option, or are they bringing forth multiple options that will then, through another deliberative process, be brought down to one?
If I might, that's a little tough to ask a committee that hasn't met yet.
Well, then I would address that to you then.
Then, from my standpoint, the first order of business, which we are engaged in right now, is negotiating with the insurance company. Once we find that out, then we can define the scope of the project. Then that timeline makes sense to put forward.
But will they be coming forth? It says, I'm just wondering about how many options will be brought forth. Is it multiple options, or will there be just one option brought forth?
That will both be up to the committee. And think of options as not just macro options, as it was mentioned in the public session, not just option 1, 2, 3, or 4, but option 1, there might be 5 different options within it based on what cost things, or add alternates to come as part of that. So don't think of it as just big options. There might be some smaller options. So don't read too much into that plural S that's in that. We tried to write the charge to give the committee some flexibility in terms of how they approach this, realizing that the 3 of us couldn't define quite everything that might come up and the new information that might come forward after. So we tried to give a certain amount of flexibility to the committee there.
Okay, and then just to clarify, so from the options stage to then doing things where it says, I'm just kind of reading highlighted lines, retain appropriate design professionals, retain construction managers, all those other steps, is there sort of a segue between when those options are determined? Like, what is the sort of pause between the review of options and then moving into this next phase? Is there a section where there's time to sort of, okay, breathe and say that's a...
Well, I think you're going to need the help from certain design professionals as well as the engineers that have currently been involved in reviewing the project to understand what some of those options are and what the implications are.
Okay, so that you're saying that's
So-
part and parcel to the deliberative process of coming up
Very
with those
much so, because this is basically a handoff. For those of you that were around during the Ward roof project, we had started some of that ahead of time. When we brought the committee in, there was a handoff between the TFC at that point and the building committee to pick it up. There are certain things that we've had in progress to get to this point. Again, for those of you that saw it, the engineers have done a certain amount of analysis as what's taken place, what contributed to the problem, what some of the fixes might be, and what some of the issues are. One of the first steps is going to be getting the building committee up to speed in terms of what's transpired so far, and that will put them in a better position to plan out what happens from here. As you can see from the committee, a number have been involved in prior building committees, all right, and a number have project management background and other skill sets that help go forward. That's why we're so impressed with this group of people. I should point out that we had 40 applications come in for this. There were a number of well-qualified people, so I don't mean to suggest that some of the folks that weren't chosen weren't qualified, but this is in Top Gun terminology, the best of the best.
Thank you.
Representative Bateson?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 3. Through you to the First Selectman, I've got a couple of questions. I want some clarification on Representative Donovan's line of questioning. I just want to make sure that there is funding in place, and I understand that through the $5.2 million appropriation for Sandy. I just want to make sure that any amounts of monies expended by this committee shall come back to the Board of Selectmen, Finance, and RTM.
With a possible exception of the word any, because some of that money has already been expended in terms
Yeah,
of hiring the engineers
like
to
that
date.
study that was performed? Okay.
Well, we basically hired professional engineers to come in, do the evaluation,
Prior to shoveling the ground, you're going to come back to Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, RTM?
Yes.
Okay, I want to, in the charge, it says you can populate this committee to 11. Do you plan on that, or are you going to stay with the 9?
Right now, 9 seems like a good number, but
Okay.
based on requests from the committee, if there's other skill sets we need, or forgive me, committee members, if there are attendance issues and we need more folks up to that, we have the flexibility to bring 2 more people on.
Okay, my last concern goes to your powers as first selectman. I understand your powers and I respect them. I want to make sure that there's no muddying of the waters when it comes to who's going to be negotiating insurance settlements on this. I don't want our carrier to be confused as to who's running that show. I imagine that your office still retains the right to negotiate and accept settlements. I believe it's you and not the Board of Selectmen.
I'm actually not 100% positive on that, Mr. Bateson. I will check and confirm, but
I just want to make sure
it
we're
is my
not-
office that's doing the negotiating at this point.
And you're not surrendering that to the committee level. That will still stay in your office.
Correct. However, given the background of certain members on the committee, I may ask for their help.
But the sole acceptance is going to stay at the executive level, not the committee level.
That's the plan at the moment.
Thank you.
Representative Marks.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Alan Marks, District 6. First of all, thank you all for volunteering. It's a very impressive group based on your expertise. You have volunteered for a difficult and challenging job, no doubt. I do have a question for one of you. I'm singling out through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Bass. I understand, as you said, you are the executive director, is it? President, right, of the Fair Acres Association. The longer I live here, the more I find out about interesting groups in town that I didn't know much about. Could you just describe the association and what it does, just very briefly?
Please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to. Fair Acres is an association, represents approximately 400 homeowners in the Fairfield Beach area, all of whom have deeded beach rights to the beach. If you go to Town Hall and look at the deeds on our property, it actually says deeded beach rights. And this is the organization that also is responsible for maintaining the pentways to the beach and covering the insurance on the pentways so that people have access to the beach outside of the normal entranceway to the beach.
Silly question. What is a pentway?
Sure. So if you're on Fairfield Beach Road, there at the end of Roland Road and at the end of Lally Boulevard, you'll see 2 gates, and those gates have walkways to the beach. Those are the pentways to the beach. So if you live on Roland Road and you want to get down to the beach, you don't have to walk all the way over to the pavilion. You can go straight through the pentway.
Thank you. Just one other question. Does the Fair Acres Association have an official position on the Penfield Pavilion?
This is almost the most exercise I've had today, walking back and forth. Thank you. No, the Fair Acres Association does not have an official position on the pavilion.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any further questions from the body? Representative Donovan, I saw Representative Farnan earlier. Farnan, then Donovan.
You're trying to sneak out, I know.
You can get up with me.
I'm blocking the camera, apparently.
Brian Farnan, the Fighting 10th District. So here's in our areas from the beach area, and I guess this is a question through the moderator to our first selectman. What I'm having trouble with is that obviously the hurricane was over a year, and why did it take over a year to get this committee together?
I think it's part of the timing process we go through. We got the funding approved to hire an engineering firm in late January, early February. Forgive me, I just can't remember if it was the January meeting or the February meeting that we took place. Then we had to write up the specs, send out an RFP or RFQ for qualifications, let the engineers respond, select the engineer, give them time to do work. We had the
No. But I guess I'm having trouble with this committee here. Why did it take this long to get this committee established? I guess that's what I'm struggling with. Because we had the listening tour, which I thought was great to get feedback. But then I just feel like there's no sense of urgency. And I feel like the likelihood of this project being done, I mean, this summer is obviously a wash. I mean, I'm actually questioning whether it's going to be closed for 2 years.
Yeah, if you would let me finish.
Sure.
All right. Once the engineers got done and gave a presentation to the Board of Selectmen, that was the first time we understood the magnitude of some of the issues and realized it was a lot more than just a simple repair project from that standpoint. The engineers then presented to the Parks and Rec Commission so they would understand, and then we went out to the public. In order to have those meetings, you've got to have proper notice between those. So it's not for lack of sense of urgency, but in order to go through the process to make sure everybody understood. You can't get 100 people in a room without some proper notice to let that happen and to have it set up on Fair TV to go through. Coming out of that, we identified we wanted a building committee. We put the word out. We first set up a charge. We put the word out to get people in. We had 40 resumes come in. All that just takes time. It's not a function of a lack of urgency. It is very much a commitment to do the job right and make sure that we cover all the bases, that we learn from what happened the first time, and that we're not in a rush to get it done. We're in a rush to get it done right.
Okay. Well, lastly, I'd just like to thank you guys for volunteering your time. Thank you.
Representative Donovan.
Thanks, John Donovan, District 1. Through you, Madam Moderator, to the First Selectman. How much for the $1 million has been spent?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can certainly get it for you.
Great, thank you.
Representative DiMartino. If there are no questions for the committee, I would love for them to be able to return to their seats if they could.
Representative DiMartino, District 4. First, I'd like to thank you all for your volunteering to be on this committee, so I appreciate that and want to thank you. A couple of questions I have. I just generally want to understand how many of you live in the beach area? Just a show of hands if you don't mind. I'm sure a few of us are curious about this. So 1, 2. Okay, 2 out of the group. Okay, thank you. I was just seeing if it was a disproportionate amount. Second thing is, we discussed or we asked about lessons learned from Penfield Part 1, the prior building project, and I was surprised to hear, even from the structural engineer, Mr. Jones, that...
Microphone.
Sorry. I was surprised to hear that one of the lessons wasn't necessarily the pylons, because I thought that the engineering study said that the pylons weren't necessarily dug deep enough into the bedrock. Is that correct, or I know elevation of the building is
Representative DiMartino, I think this may be a question that may be outside of their scope of knowledge at this point.
Sorry. Okay. And I guess that's it. Yeah. Oh, well, sorry, one last thing. I just encourage you all to consider the budget of this issue, of this project. I know that several members have served on other budgets or building committees, such as Fairfield Woods, and that went over budget. I just wanted you to consider that.
Thank you. Representative Iacono. Okay.
Pam Iacono, District 9. Thank you all for volunteering your time. I just had a couple of things. Some of them were just process commentary. To the First Selectman, I understand you received 40 applications, and I know many of the gentlemen up here personally. Great committee you've put together. I'm disappointed there's only one woman here. I'm also a little confused through the moderator to the First Selectman. You mentioned that you put together the charge first and then went out and solicited members of the committee, but when I read through the committee packet, the charge hadn't been written by or read by anyone with the exception of Ms. Nelson when they answered this call. Was there something that I misunderstood? It says here that the charge was written on the 16th. A lot of these applications were filled out, some of them in early, here's October 1st, October 5th. So I'm just kind of confused about whether or not the charge was put together and then you went to look for applicants, or if you first solicited applicants and then put together the charge.
Before the first selectman answers that, could I ask that the committee be seated?
I actually had a follow-up question based on that. Now, based on what I've read in the packet, have each of you gone ahead and read the charge?
Yes. Yes.
And are you all comfortable with it? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's all the questions I have
Thank
for
you.
them.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
But to answer the question simply, the charge may not have been finalized as we were taking in applications, so they may not have. We made sure they all got a copy of it. And in fact, to make sure that the charge was clear, we actually voted on it at one Board of Selectmen meeting, held it over, put it on the agenda at the next Board of Selectmen meeting. In between times, in fact, I know some members of this board responded with comments and feedback on the charge to make sure that we had the charge, it was public, that we took solicited public comment. The items that, or the emails that we got back, or the comments we got back, will be copied and made available to the whole committee. So that was probably about as clean a process as we could get through with that.
As a matter of practice, do you generally solicit first and then write the charge, or in a better circumstance, do you tend to write the charge and then solicit applicants?
We kind of do them concurrently, because we can get out a press release looking for members, while in fact the Board of Selectmen is addressing the charge. Before anybody accepts or before we nominate anybody, we make sure that they have a copy of the charge so they can review it and they know what they're signing up for.
Yeah, that would be my personal preference, is that the charge is written and that way people don't come in with preconceived notions.
I think if you go back and look at the process we followed, you'll see that it conformed to that.
Thank you.
Further questions on the appointments? Representative Jacob.
Ellen Jacob, District 9. Madam Moderator, through you to Mr. Tetro. This isn't directly related to the appointees, but just also a matter of process, a question about that. Since we did go through the trouble of having engineers draw up the three options that were presented at the hearing, I did go to one of them this past summer. Are you starting with that as the three major options to be considered, or will there be others? There were some suggested by the public as well.
That will be our recommendation to the committee, but certainly that body of knowledge is what's important in terms of what happened to the pavilion during the storm, what contributed to any of the damage, what things we can do to mitigate that going forward, as well as has been mentioned multiple times here, also looking outside the structure in terms of, I'm going to call it the landscaping, but it's the flood-related things, to make sure that we're doing our best to make sure the site does not contribute to flooding in the neighborhood. That's a challenge because the neighborhood also has a lot of marsh in back, and so regardless of what happens here, there's going to be a certain amount of flooding when we get a surge of 12 feet, or 11 and a half feet as we did during Storm Sandy, but this site should not contribute to that.
Well, that was one of the major concerns that came up at the hearing I attended anyway, so I'm glad to hear that you have a couple of residents from the neighborhood on that committee. And the other question was, will there be any more public input, or is that it? And now it's really compiling all the input thus far.
The reason for having a building committee like this is so their meetings are conducted in public, so there should be public comment or input throughout the whole process.
And will that be published, put out there, so people who are still interested and want to be part of the discussion can do that?
Yeah, it should be published like each of our building committees. We currently have Riverfield and Ward Roof and the Ludlow renovation going, so that same process is what this should model.
Thank you.
Any further questions from this body, or have we exhausted all questions regarding seating this building committee? Seeing none. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back to vote. All in favor of accepting the 9 members? Shall I read it again? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Steele. All in favor? All opposed? Abstentions? Representative Melaragno. Thank you. Pardon? Okay, the next item. I hope your meetings aren't too long. Maybe we'll all try and attend some of them. The next item on the call is item number 7, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the bond resolution entitled, "A Resolution Approving a Grant from the Department of Transportation for Improvements in the Commerce Drive, Kings Highway area, appropriating $1.2 million for the cost of such project, and authorizing the issuance of $1.2 million bonds to fund such appropriation, consisting of 3 pages, be and hereby is approved." I have a motion to discuss. Representative Hochberg, second. Representative Lee. I saw your hand. Presenting tonight will be Mr. Hurley. If you would be so kind, for all our new members, just introduce yourself and what you do for the town.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bill Hurley, the engineering manager for the town, and with me is Mark Barnhart, the housing and economic director. The town, in cooperation with the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council, has applied for and received conditional approval for a reimbursable grant for alternative means of transportation regarding bicycle pedestrian improvements near the new train station. Engineering, DPW, Housing and Development have received numerous requests to improve and encourage more walking and biking in the area. Residents, commuters, members of the Fairfield Bike and Pedestrian Coalition, and a few RTM members have asked for sidewalk improvements and additional sidewalks and bicycle amenities along the Black Rock Turnpike, Commerce Drive, Kings Highway neighborhoods. And they stated so at a well-attended public informational meeting that was held June 27th, 2013. In order to proceed with the grant application, the town must sign a resolution and a commitment letter endorsing the up to $1.2 million project that involves an 80% reimbursement for the project. The main construction components are concrete sidewalks, concrete curbs, ADA-compliant handicap ramps, would investigate bicycle routes, install additional bicycle amenities, bike racks, signs, and bike parking. Also included will be some median improvements to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment. We could even investigate a median removal where it's possible. These sidewalks would have to be replaced soon, or some of the sections would have to be replaced soon, and eventually, like in a 10-year time frame, most of the sidewalks would have to be completely repaired or replaced based on their existing condition. As I mentioned before, on June 27th, the town held a public informational meeting to gauge interest, and over 20 people attended, and 5 responded positively via email. There were no objections at all to the project at the meeting. And a matter of fact, they wanted the town to expand the project to include Berwick, Fairchild, and Castle Avenues. The project area, and I could show on the map, consists of Kings Highway East from Chambers Street to Brentwood Avenue, with extensions along Kings Highway East, Chambers Street, Commerce Drive, and if possible or funding allows, Berwick and Brentwood and Fairchild Avenue. Bicycle amenities would also be included. Train stations over this way. The original application was about done 6 or 7 years ago.
Bill, can you speak in a mic?
Okay. I'll try to do it this way. Oh, okay. I know. Okay. I won't do karaoke. The train station's located over here, and the original application, which was done about 6 or 7 years ago, when someone talked about the time and the process, these things take a while. We finally, as I said, got preliminary awarded, or conditional awarded. We actually included Kings Highway here, Kings Highway, but since that time, DPW did a section of sidewalk. We had the Whole Foods development come in, they did a new sidewalk, and Stone Ridge Condominium Project had come in, they had done a sidewalk. So basically, through our zoning mechanism and through our DPW, we were able to complete that section of sidewalk, and so that's why we started hopping onto the other side of the turnpike. I was going to say, over here it is the Kings Highway, or commonly called Route 1, Kings Highway East. Throwing in some local businesses or whatever, it's near the Miller dealership. There's a couple of churches and delis along the way, and if you continue all the way to the end there, it's where we are right now at the Board of Education building. Chambers Street and Brentwood Avenue, if funding allows, we would continue. They have sidewalks to a certain area and then they stop, so we would continue them, hook them up to Commerce Drive right here, and then that would provide what we call like a network loop. That's the proposal basically before you. The process, I have a schedule here. The schedule would be, hopefully the resolution could be signed in December 2013. The RFQ for design would be in January or February of 2014. The design phase would start in April 2014. We would work with the neighborhood groups, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, and any interested parties in that meanwhile. Then we would also hold another public informational meeting on roughly June 2014. The final design phase would be October 2014 to January 2015, depending on permits. We would have to acquire a Department of Transportation permit for this. Construction would probably start in the spring of 2015 through December 2015. It's about an 8-month construction cycle. If there were delays regarding the paperwork or utilities or state permits, then the final project could even be delayed to 2016. But right now, ideally, we would like the construction to be in March 2015 to December 2015. So, if there's any questions.
Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. Can you, Mr. Hurley, explain what conditional approval means?
Basically, we have been awarded the grant, but in order to accept the grant, they needed a commitment letter from the town and a formal resolution.
So the condition is basically the RTM?
Correct.
Okay. And assuming we were to approve it, then the state would reimburse the 80% of the cost of this project?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Gottlieb.
Julie Gottlieb, District 6. Question through you, Madam Moderator. It's really nice to say that. it may be to Mr. Hurley or elsewhere, can you give us an idea of what buses, current public transportation currently runs through there, and where some of the trouble spots are and how things generally look?
I'm not exactly familiar with the exact bus stops, but we are working with conjunction with the Greater Regional Planning or Regional Council. They certainly know where all the bus stops are. There obviously is a bus drop-off at the train station. And we also, one of the reasons for expanding, and if assuming the grant works well, we're hoping to maybe even get a grant like Phase 2 for, say, next year or the year after. We would love to continue it along the Kings Highway and really get a hold of the Fairchild Avenue. There's a couple of new developments, affordable housing developments there that we would like to tie in. And as I mentioned before at the public hearing, Castle Avenue, Brentwood, and there were a couple of other streets, Berwick, they really expressed strong interest that we be able to continue the grant and serve their neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Representative Schwartz.
Hal Schwartz, District 7. Mr. Hurley, can you talk about priorities and if the grant will extend itself? Can you tell me what the priorities are? Are we starting with Kings Highway at a certain point and working our way, I guess it would be south, right? Or west, I'm not sure.
Well, actually east, actually, yeah. It would be basically from the Miller dealership along Route 1 or Kings Highway east, and then from there we would go Commerce Drive and Brentwood, and then extend it out further if funding allows, like
So basically, we're going
Spurs.
to do the area that's right out here, just further down here. So Kings Highway would be first, and then the side streets, and then Commerce Drive? Is that what your
Yes,
plan would be?
that would be correct,
with
right.
the best results. Thank you.
Representative McCarthy, then Dean.
Tom McCarthy, District 8. Again, through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Hurley. How does this process direction integrate with the overarching plan of the Bike and Pedestrian Committee? Was this one of the specific areas they identified as a likely candidate?
Yes, it is. When the train station opened up, I'll give you an example. When the train station opened up, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee reminded the town that if you lived north of the turnpike, you couldn't even cross legally to get to the train station. The town was well aware of that, that when the intersection was realigned here, the state had put on a no pedestrian crossing sign. Through that mechanism, we just had the Engineering Department and Public Works talk to the state DOT, and we were able to have the DOT install pedestrian signals and the DPW provided the handicap ramp. So we actually created now a crossing in that location.
Well, my understanding of the
Sure.
overarching direction or principle behind the committee's work is to leave your car at home and either take a bike or walk to areas in town. I'm just trying to, for my simple mind, how I reconcile that principle with this particular area here. The plan is people to walk to the train station or ride their bikes at the train station. Is that
That's definitely one of the goals to do that. In this area here, in general terms, might not be as affluent as some other areas, so we would certainly want to encourage them, rather than get dropped off, to maybe either walk or bike ride to the train station. There's also a lot of people who, especially when the weather's nice, like to do it as a recreational activity as well. It's in the bike and pedestrian plan. They had listed several areas in the plan and streets along which I don't have it here in front of me, but the town has a sidewalk map that shows the gaps in sidewalks and where in areas that they don't have sidewalks. And so we're trying to close those gaps as a way of encouraging, because again, from the Bike and Pedestrian Committee and from members of the public at that public hearing, they claim, you know, it's the old adage of if you build it, they will come. They were claiming that it's the lack of sidewalks, a lack of safety, and various issues are the reason why they don't right now currently do that. And so that's why they do park their car, or they have someone, you know, drop them off, or whatever it may be. So.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Do you want to? Selectman Bay.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And just to follow up to the answer for Representative McCarthy, I am currently a liaison to the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and yes, that group has directly discussed this project and is in full support of it, one. And two, members of that group were present at the public informational meeting in June to discuss that and how it integrates into the plan. So I want you to be confident that there is definitely conversation, and Mr. Hurley has been excellent about working with the group, as well as Mr. Barnhart and other members of the town, to ensure that we're having conversations that everything works together well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 4. I'm very pleased with this project, this plan, and I was very happy to hear about and read about it and see it. The visual is wonderful. I'm also excited to hear that there is a potential for additional grant money, which makes me ask about this grant money, in that if we chose to not take advantage of it, what would happen?
I believe the money would not be available to us. It would probably be available to the region in another form. So another town like, say, Monroe or Trumbull or Bridgeport would take that money. That's what happened about 15 years ago. There was a project that Monroe had presented in front of the region. It fell apart, lost public support. The town was able to, with the conjunction with the city of Bridgeport, improve an intersection right by the Discovery Museum with Park Avenue and Goulding. It was almost $1 million project. We pounced on it and got it all approved and got it constructed in less than 2 years. So
That's really wonderful. I think Fairfield in general is moving towards being a more pedestrian-friendly environment, and I would strongly urge my fellow representatives on this body to support this grant. And I thank you, Mr. Tetreault, for taking care of the details and making this move forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Marmion, then Jacobs.
Sheila Marmion, District 6. Through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Hurley. Do you have any sense, or do we have any numbers in terms of accidents or issues that have occurred because of pedestrians walking along these specific roadways, or bikers that we know of? Or do we just have a general sense that this is not safe?
right now, it's a general sense. We could do accident investigations through the police department that have some of the records for that. But again, at the public information meeting, there were several people that claimed it was difficult to cross certain streets, and so this project would also highlight some crosswalks as well.
Okay, and the second question I have is, do we have any sense from a traffic standpoint, because obviously one of the goals of doing this is to get cars off the road to a certain extent, so that people could access that train station via foot or bicycle. Do we have any sense of how many people might be interested in doing this, or again, are we just kind of guesstimating that there are a number of people out there who are interested?
Yeah, it's really a guesstimate. I would imagine that the improvement in getting traffic off the roadway would be a slight improvement, not a major one. Changing habits are still pretty hard, but if gas goes up to $5, $6 a gallon, then, you know, if it was an if, then things might change considerably.
Are there currently bike racks at the train station?
Yes.
There are, okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I fully support this. I think if we as a town want to look at improving our traffic flow, giving people access to the new train station, having them bike safely, walk safely, improve this neighborhood, I think it's all good. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Jacobs. Yes. That's you.
Ellen Jacob, District 9. Through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Tetro. I'm sorry. You know, I have this horrible feeling. I keep asking you the same question year in and year out, and you always explain it, and I don't get it. But so let's hope it's just really short and not too painful. When do we actually acquire the debt? In other words, when this project, it sounds like, is a few years in happening from what was just described. So I'm possibly 2015, 2016 is when it actually gets done. Do we borrow now and then get repaid, or do we borrow as we need it and just approve this amount as the maximum amount that we will borrow?
Okay. From the top, and just, again, because there's so many new folks here, our long-term capital plan is covered in something we affectionately call the waterfall chart and the supporting documents. Mr. Mayor, our CFO, has put together a series of documents that show when things are approved, when the money is spent, and consequently then when it's borrowed. But for the most part, the process is it gets approved as a project, it then gets built, and we do a lot of that, or at least some of the initial funding, out of our normal cash flow, and then we go out to the markets and borrow it, either in a bond anticipation note for typically smaller amounts of money, and then once it's finalized, we might put that into a bond issue, which would be spread over 20 years. Typically, in this case, because it's reimbursed, we'll get some or all of that reimbursement before we put it out to bond, so we won't have to bond quite as much. So the net effect of this should be bonding about $200,000. There might be some timing issues, because our state is not always as quick to reimburse us as we'd like, but as we get that money back in, we can apply that to the bond repayments. Does that help?
It does, but is there, in the agreement, I'm fighting with this thing, I'm losing, is
You just
there...
broke it. It sounds like
Oh,
you're
I think
winning.
I broke it. I'm sorry. I didn't break it.
No, it just took it off the hinge.
Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, you just-
Gentleman and a scholar, Mr. Hurley.
Thank you. Is there a contract that eventually becomes part of this so that there's a schedule of repay, or I guess it becomes repayment from the grant? Is there a set schedule of when?
Typically, there's not a set schedule. There are milestones. Bill, would you be more familiar with that?
Yeah, for an example, and unfortunately, even with this grant process, chances are we'll be back here before the RTM for each phase of the project. That's the way the state does it. So when we do the design phase, we'll have to come back and ask for that. Then when we do the construction, we'll have to do that. So
What Mr. Hurley is referring to is that the state
For each
typically
agreement.
wants certain proof of authorization by the town bodies. So what he's talking about is not coming for necessarily a funding authorization, because that's you're doing tonight, or not doing tonight, but authorization to proceed with each phase.
Thanks for clearing that out, yeah. And then, so an example would be, going to the other part of your question, is like, even for design, we would probably, by the time we do the construction, we would have been reimbursed almost all the design, or like at least 90% of the design money. And then we would then go into the next phase, the construction phase, for that.
So you define what you're doing, then the money's already partly there, then we borrow it. The sequence is, okay, that's what I'm confused about. It's sort of how it happens, the order in which it happens.
Perhaps the simplest way to show that is if you'd like to sit down with Mr. Mayor at some point and go through the documentation supporting for the waterfall chart, or if this body would like a presentation on that at some point to help.
Not tonight.
Because this process is pretty much the same we're going to follow in a lot of the reimbursement type grants. The numbers change.
And I guess that's what's confusing.
And
But-
unless, Mr. Mayor, you'd like to add some clarifying comments here tonight?
Hi, thank you. The authorization basically does four things. It allows the town, gives then the first selectman, the board of selectmen, the authorization to obtain the grant. It allows the town to expend up to $1.2 million, $960,000 of which will be reimbursed by the state. It allows the town to issue, if it chooses to do so, $1.2 million to fund the program. The town may or may not issue bonds at all. Finally, the authorization requires that all state funds are used, if received before funds are issued, to reduce the amount of the bond that would be issued, or if they're received after bonds are issued, to be applied directly to pay the bond. So the thing will be, you'll end up with a maximum of $240,000 that could be residually bonded and paid off through band notes, which would be paid off over a 5-year period. So the process is kind of fairly clear. We spend the money, we are reimbursed, and we use the reimbursement to pay down the bonds. Does that help?
Yeah, actually, that's the most logical. All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Any further questions? I see Representative Ambrose first. And we'll go back here.
Thank you. Peter Ambrose, District 2. I firmly support this project. I pick up my granddaughter who lives just a short distance from St. Emery's Church, and I take her, I will walk with her with a stroller from there to either Whole Foods or BJ's, and I know this area well. These sidewalks are in terrible disrepair. In fact, there are times when I have to walk out into the street near the old Drotus Market to just get away from the broken sidewalks and walk safely around the corner to either the hot dog area or to BJ's or Whole Foods. This area is in dire need of sidewalks and road improvements. There's a double lane of traffic going in both directions on Kings Highway. The traffic it's a nightmare during the course of the afternoon or at night in each direction because the cars go by so swiftly. So I really feel that this project is well needed. This section of town begs for these type of improvements, and I hope you pass this resolution tonight.
Thank you, Representative Ambrose. Representative Devlin, you still have a question?
Should I try this one first?
Yeah. If not, I'll give you this one.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Laura Devlin, District 3. So I just have a couple questions. I'm one of the newer ones, so indulge me for a minute, just to understand the costing. So from what I get so far, this is a grant for $1.2 million. The state will reimburse $960,000, so the town has an exposure of about $240,000, or 20% of that amount. What's stated in number 4 is that the costs are relatively accurate, but that there's some unknown costs such as utility relocation, potential right-of-way, easement costs, and subsurface or geotechnical issues that could come up. So granted, it already says they're relatively accurate, there's some unknowns, but what's the potential impact of that in terms of the exposure for the town?
Well, basically, in this case, we'll be backing in sort of to the grant. There's an amount set up, and then what we'll do is we will, when we go out to contract bid, we will bid it by a unit price of, say, per square feet of sidewalk. So whatever that bid is, whatever we get, we'll go to a certain limit and then say that's it. If it goes over a little bit, then maybe DPW can, chip in a little bit to finish. We're not going to leave it half a block, you know what I mean? But we would go to a certain point. A lot of times we also do like an add alternate on the item so that if the bids come in low, we said, okay, we have enough and we'll continue with the add alternate where we're able to add to the project. So those are ways or mechanisms that we use to make sure that we don't go over.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Way.
Carol Way, District 5. I've walked from Villa Avenue to the new train station and back several times, and I am one of the RTM people who complained about the sidewalk situation, the dirtiness of that whole area. It's like the stepchild of Fairfield. So this really does need to be done. But I also have another question, and this is just, I know it's not going to be touched by the grant, but I don't understand why something more can't be done. The I. Brown Brothers building, and also the Nissan dealership building. I mean, even just the cleaning up of that space would be something that would be appreciated by people living in that district and also by anyone driving through it. It's really a blight. And Madam Moderator, to First Selectman Tetro, in connection with that, I have gone to Joe Michelangelo in connection with it also. I believe the I. Brown Brother building is now owned by Bob Cinto? Is that
I
correct?
don't believe that's the case, but I don't know the actual ownership, but I'm not sure. I know Mr. Cinto's involved in the project because his signage is kind of
It's on it.
in those, the screening on it. You can kind of see it
Right.
through that. I don't know if he's the actual owner of the project at this point, though.
Well,
But
he is a Fairfield resident, and certainly all of his other properties are kept up beautifully, so if that is the case,
yeah, the projects that he owns, you're absolutely right. He's done a stellar job on. He's been a very good corporate citizen from that standpoint. The Brown Brothers project was identified as a blighted property. And for those of you that are new, the whole blight program and blight ordinance was something that was added to the duties of our building department a while back with no extra staff. So it's one of those things that was not, we kind of gave ourselves an unfunded mandate. So Mr. Gillerin has done a superb job over time, but he does not have extra staff to look at this. However, just so everybody's clear, specifically I. Brown Brothers property was identified as a blighted property about a year and a half ago. We were fining them to the tune of $100 a day. The town collected approximately $40,000 in fines when that property was transferred. And I'm going to say that was about 6 months ago, 4 to 6 months ago when that happened. So I believe that the design efforts in place at this point, but I do not know the exact status of that.
if we could find out about that, I would really appreciate it. As I say, I have asked some questions about it. The other thing, too, in the meantime, is there any possibility of, as we've had volunteer cleanups in numerous places around the town, is there any possibility of at least getting rid of all the weeds that are growing there and the garbage that's been dumped inside the fencing?
Okay. Is that an offer of volunteer help?
I'll work with other people.
Okay. The challenge again, in all these cases, and one of the tricky
Private
things
property. Yes.
on the blight ordinance or that type of cleanup is this is private property. So technically, we both need permission, and there might be some other issues in terms of doing that. That's been one of the challenges in terms of getting blight options cleaned up. One of the items that may be coming before this board is some revisions to the blight ordinance to create a revolving fund for the building department. So in fact, for smaller projects, they can go out and fund some of that cleanup for folks. We don't want to get into the private landscaping business. That's not what we're talking about.
Exactly.
But in very specific situations, if we can help clean it up for a given neighborhood, that would be the case. In this case, because it's a commercial landlord or commercial property owner, I think they should have the funding to do that, so we can probably talk to them directly on that.
And with the Nissan,
Have you had a chance to talk to the blight department about this yet?
no, as I did mention it to Joe and Michelangelo about, going to the blight department in connection with it.
Okay, yeah, just for the record, for anybody who has the issue, the blight department is housed in our building department. So you want to get them to them directly, but I will take this up with blight for you.
And with the Nissan area, they have unpainted plywood on that building. Is there any way that we can at least get them to paint the plywood so that it wouldn't be quite, such an eyesore?
I will also take that up with our blight department on your behalf.
And I'm very much in favor of this project. It really needs to be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions that are germane to the resolution and the bonding for this? Representative Pontrelli.
Representative Pontrelli, District 9. Through you, Madam Moderator, I don't know to whom to address the question. Whenever we have grant money, I'm concerned. Oh wow, that's big. About any strings attached to the funds that we get from the state. Now, sometimes those strings aren't really obvious, so this is called the TAP program. Are you familiar with Moving Ahead for Progress? MAP 21, that's the name of the initiative under which TAP comes. So that sounds like a crazy name, but it's called Moving Ahead for Progress. I looked up that initiative, and when you read into it, there are lots of kind of demands that program puts into play. Transit-oriented development, which is high-density housing, a thing called environmental justice. So I guess my first question is, are you aware of any strings that are attached when you take this grant money?
In this particular case, no.
That's a no. Okay. And here's one question, maybe it's crazy, but would we be able to have access to the application process or the forms, just to satisfy my concern?
Well, the application's already been submitted in. Freedom of information, you can come to the engineering department or and look at the file. And as I mentioned before, as we start the design process, we plan on meeting with the neighborhood group or the people who had showed up to the first public meeting and get a little bit more detail and more information and more input from them. And then when the designer comes up with what they call design plans or 30% stage, there would be another public hearing. Again, that is one of the requirements of the grant, to have a public hearing, and then there the public would be able to see the improvements and how it affects them positively or negatively or whatever, Okay, so I can get that through. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Any further questions? Selectman Kiley.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mr. Hurley, at the Board of Selectmen, we had a rather robust discussion about the funding for this project. and specifically alternative forms of grants that might be available to the town to offset our 20%, the $240,000. Specifically, they were community block grant award money that you might have available to use as part of that 240 to reduce the town's $240,000 obligation without jeopardizing our $960,000 80% portion. Could you please update us on that?
Sure, I'm going to refer that to Mark, since he's in charge of that fund.
We did check with the Greater Bridgeport, Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development for the town. We did ask the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council whether we could use community development block grants, which is a federal funding source provided to the town as the town match, a non-federal source match, and they indicated in the affirmative. So this is potentially eligible for utilization of community development block grant funds for design and/or construction. We would need to allocate that during the annual action plan process, and that would be one possibility to further reduce the town's funding for this project.
Any other further questions? Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 3. I just want to follow up on Mr. Barnhart's statement. Does that conflict with item number 1 in the bond resolution then, resulting in a maximum grant of $960,000? I guess that would either go to Mr. Barnhart or Mr. Tetro. How so?
It does not, because what we're referring to is the grant from the state for the federal transportation dollars here, not referring to community development block grants, which would potentially be another source.
Okay, thank you. In the spirit of getting this thing done, you have our permission to get all grants.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll follow that direction.
Any further questions from the body? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'm going to come back for a vote. All those in favor of accepting this resolution as it was presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We're not done yet. Just want to remind you all that we meet again next month on Monday, December 16th. There will be no committee meetings prior to our meeting on the 16th. We once again will be meeting as a whole. The Selectmen's meeting was postponed until December 11th. Questions? Representative McKenzie.
For 2 years, I've watched microphones being used. We're all amateurs, but it's been very sporadic. This one's very good. That one's okay. This one's terrible. I would like to ask that we spend the money to have the best microphones you can have for amateurs and maintain quality control so we can always hear. Or I'm going to have to bring in my ear trumpet. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll entertain. Thank you. Maybe we'll just keep the microphones out of the hands of amateurs. How's that? I want to thank you all so very much for the opportunity to stand here with you tonight and for all your attention, and thank you to the town clerk and everyone who was here. So thank you. I entertain a motion to adjourn. Representative Marks, second by Representative Iacono. Thank you. All in favor? You're all done. Thank you.